We have with us 4 politicians from our Nordic part of the world who will now reflect on the issues of the moment: gender, class, race, and religion as a part of democracy. I would like to present each one of them before we begin. Gudrun Schyman is one of the 2 leaders of Feminist Initiative, a feminist political party in Sweden founded in 2005. She was first known as the leader of the Left Party in Sweden for 10 years, where she raised memorably the issues of feminism. As one of the 2 leaders of Feminist Initiative, she has participated in mobilizing a new generation in feminism with often untraditional methods. Gudrun has enthusiastically participated in public debates regarding issues of gender equality, class, and in the past months, the situation of refugees. Stefan Wallin is Member of Parliament in Finland since 2007 and former chairman of the Swedish People's Party in Finland. He has also served as Minister for the Environment and Minister for Nordic Cooperation, Minister for Culture and Sports, Minister for Defense, and between 2007 and 2011, Minister for Gender Equality. He has participated in the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women in New York for 5 years. He holds a master's degree in political science and lives in Åbo, where he is a member of the City Council. Gunvør Balle is former member of the Faroe Parliament, where she served as a spokesperson on gender issues, culture, education, and West Nordic cooperation. From 2007 to 2010, she was the head of representation of the Faroe Islands to Iceland, and prior to that, she worked on development aid within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and as a manager of offshore service company, PAM Offshore Service. Last but not least, Sigríður Ingibjörg Ingadóttir is chair of the Committee for Social Affairs and Health in Alþjóðleg, the Icelandic Parliament, and has been an MP for the Social Democratic Alliance since 2009, and ran for chairman of the party earlier this year. Before she was active in the Women's Alliance in the 1990s, Sigríður has a degree in history from the University of Iceland and master degree in economics from Uppsala University in Sweden. She has worked in public administration and for the labor movement. I would like to start by raising a few questions for the panel, and then I have some specific questions for each country and each participant, which you are, of course, welcome to react to as well. But first, I would like to say that if there is such a thing as a joint Nordic identity, the factors of equality and fairness are probably the center themes in that identity. The Nordic countries make it to the top of the most list of equality and general welfare, and we like to see ourselves as very good people and good at equality. Still, none of the Nordic countries has managed to eradicate the gender pay gap, and all countries see high numbers of violence against women. Racism is still prevalent, and fundamentalist political parties seem to enjoy support in most of our countries. So, the small question here is, what have we done right in building up the Nordic welfare model? What have we done wrong? How can the Nordic countries serve as a role model for other areas of the world, and what can we learn from others? I think I will invite you, Gudrun, to begin.
Well. I would say you said small questions. And if I should, it's a bit hard to start with this after this, what we just saw, but I suppose we will come back to how these questions are put together. When it comes to a Nordic identity, I think at least people outside the Nordic country has this idea. I think we have it ourselves too. I think there is an idea of welfare system. There is an idea of general welfare instead of a private welfare system. And I think that idea is born out from also the political system that we have that are built upon public organizations, that are built on the labor organization, the early trade union organization, the, what do you call it, Bildningsförbund, the study organization, all these organizations that were built up in the early 90s, I think that has made our political arena filled up with people that are not from the upper class. And I think that has had an impact on how we have dealt with the welfare system. And if you compare with other European countries, if we go more in the south of Europe and the middle of Europe, you have politicians that are going on the same school, some kind of more elite systems, and you have the same background, you have the same education, and then you split up in different political parties. Here you come from very different backgrounds. And we have, in all our countries, have strong social democratic political parties and strong trade unions that has been carrying out this idea of the house for the people. I think that has had a good impact in the way we have built our societies with this broad idea about welfare and economic security. And that has also, from the beginning, I think, it has been a good thing for women's, the idea of women's rights, because it's very hard to exclude when you have a broad welfare system. It has been an idea of that women are, although different, we are a part of the society. So that I think we have done good. We have built up politics upon people that has come from very different parts of the society, where also poor people has had the opportunity to be a part of the political system and been carrying out a power from the people, so to say. What we have done wrong, if we see to the situation today, and I hope I'm not the only one that are very frustrated that we haven't gained more than we have. I think we should learn of history. We should applaud history. We should applaud everyone that has gone before us when it comes to strengthening women's situation. But I think we should not be paralyzed by the history and think that this is going to continue no matter what happens, because it's not. And that we see very clearly, I think, today, when a lot of nationalists and fascists groups are taking part of the politics and enter also into parliament and into government, we can see that these questions are withdrawn immediately. So I think we have to understand that there is a lack of understanding of how strong the patriarch thinking is. I think we have to be much more clear about the resistance. And we have to challenge it. And we have to be clear of that this old patriarch thinking is also a part of the traditional political system, the political infrastructure, the political parties, the trade unions, the enterprise organizations. In all our society, we have this old thinking. We have no liberated areas. So everywhere we have to look for how do you see it here? And we know that these crucial questions about salaries is still not taken care of. And the absolutely the most destructive effect is the violence. And I hope I can return to that. But those questions are not solved. And we still have it. And although we have a lot of knowledge about how the system works, and it's not questions that really are difficult. I mean, it's not difficult to put a salary out from education and what you are doing. It's not difficult to see that if you are working, taking care of old people, it's as relevant as if you are taking care of cars. It's not difficult. I mean, it's not rational, the system of salaries that we have in our countries. So we have to challenge much more, and I think, of course, we have to make it into politics, because we have to vitalize the democratic system if we should say that it is representative, and that is what we say. It's a representative democracy that we have, and it's not representative when it comes to half of the population. So we have to work these things out, and I think we could learn. I think we can learn from countries that are newer democratic countries, because they have the idea of that democracy is for everyone. This has striken me when I have been traveling in former East European countries, and when they talk about these things, it's a question of democracy. It's not a women's question.
Thank you.
To start with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stefan.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairperson. I think we have done many things right in the Nordic countries over the years. I also think that there is a common Nordic identity, and that, of course, is because we share a lot of values in the Nordic countries. When Finland joined the European Union in 1995, one argument was that the Nordic countries, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, and we also hoped for Norway at that time, could form a kind of Nordic bloc or front in the European Parliament or in European politics overall, sharing some values and goals connected to environmental issues, and also, of course, gender equality, the way how we look at people's rights, and the fact that the human value is absolute. It's not something that you discuss. We have done many things right. The Finnish legislation has, ever since more than 100 years back, been there very much for supporting gender equality and women's rights. The Finnish legislation and our constitution is based on many of those values that are common also for the other Nordic countries. In your legislation, Finland became independent in 1917 after 108 years under Russian rule, but before that we belonged to Sweden for 650 years, and that means, of course, that our legislation, the way our public sector, our society overall is constructed is very much because of our common history with Sweden. But we have done many things right. We have built a strong public sector based on taxation, and that's of course where we have a higher level of taxation in all Nordic countries. But in return, we get a lot of benefits from our social security system, and overall from society. And this everything, in fact, is very much connected to supporting gender equality and women's possibilities to be active part in the labor force, have the same rights as men. But there is a lot of job to be done, of course, and still. And if we have done a lot of things right by building a strong public sector for the purposes I just mentioned, that might also be a kind of trap, because when the economy goes down, like right now in Finland and many other countries, you might find yourself as a kind of prisoner in your strong public sector. When you have to do budget cuts, and that's what we're doing in Finland right now, you might be forced to also cut in those sectors that are that have been constructed or taken as part of the welfare system just in order to support, for instance, women's rights. We have in Finland since many years a subjective right to daycare for your children. We will change that subjective right now just because of the budget cuts, and that's not good for women, that's not good for households, that's not good for the children. Just as one example of how we can, when we are prisoners in our strong public sector, what we might be able to, or forced to do. Well, can we then give good examples to other countries? Oh yes, of course we can. For instance, a forum like the CSW in New York, held every year, is a very good arena for exchanging views, best practices, and of course many countries, especially those in the third world, admire us in the Nordic countries very much, of course because of good reasons. But we should also be careful about pointing with our fingers towards the countries in the third world. Of course, violating women and women's rights cannot be accepted at any time. But we should also, of course, we also have to realize that the changes happens very slowly in many of those countries that we would like to support. So we must be at their side, but also understand that the circumstances where many women and women rights fighters in the third world are working are very, very difficult. But I think together we are strong, and also together in Nordic countries we are strong because we have our common values.
Thank you. Gunvør.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think as well, of course, that we have done a lot of things right in the Nordic countries, even though there is quite an amount of job to be done, violence against women, as you mentioned, and we still have a gender pay gap and so on. But I think it's fair to say that the Nordic experience has been a success, and it's been important not only for individuals, families and organizations, but for society as a whole. And it points to fewer problems with aging in future, as well as higher labor activity and a more robust economy. I remember around 8 or 10 years ago, Göran Persson, Prime Minister of Sweden at that point, was visiting the Faroes, and he held a very inspirational speech, especially because he was addressing the gender issue, which we were not so used to, many women of us hearing from. We're a quite conservative society, the Faroes. We would never hear our Prime Minister talk like that, stressing so much the gender issue as he did. It was very inspirational. And mentioning
because he was abroad.
Yeah. I was just going to say he had been listening very well to you, because he was mentioning just the same issues of how thinking gender equality into every aspect of society had been crucial for Sweden's success, into all legislation, and just as Gudrun mentioned, all levels of society need to be involved in order to succeed, and not only the elite. And that democracy is for everyone. And this is all prerequisites of the welfare society, that everyone can equal opportunities for all. But if we look at what we have done wrong, I think maybe this is more interesting actually to talk about, because you can be very self-righteous just to talk about what we've done right. We can, I think it's maybe fair to take a critical look at what have we achieved and what do the critics say today. And what I experience more and more is that young women are, or a kind of counter currents is starting now, a counter reaction where a lot of young, well-educated women say, well, we're not going to be part of this system that you have pressed over our heads. We want to do what we want to do. We want to stay with our kids at home and make homemade jam. That's what we want to do. You're not going to put us into the models that you created. I'm not saying I agree with this, but I still think it's something we should dare to revise, maybe, or think again. Is the gender equality question maybe moving into another phase? Because what is very, very important for young people today is the work-life balance. How are we successful in bringing up our children and having harmony at home, as well as being successful in the labor market? So I think this is maybe the most interesting and important lesson, that we should maybe dare to revise a little bit our gender equality policy, and of course getting men more into the family life is of course what we're striving for, but instead of just focusing so blindly on such and such many women must be ministers, must be top managers, aren't we going to put the level a little bit down for everyone and meet in the middle, so that we can get this work-life balance, which everyone wants in order to have more kids, which we all want, in order to meet the aging problem. So I think this is one lesson learned that we need to look at. And there are other problems or other issues where we could learn something, or where we maybe have not been doing everything right. And when it comes to foreigners, newcomers into our country, have we done well enough to embrace them into our norms and our values? Have we maybe been a little bit too political correct and not daring to say what our values are in many of the newcomers, where they have these maybe female oppressive values with them? Are we too afraid of speaking out loud of what our norms are in order to live in our society? And this is maybe a problem which is has not been spoken so much about, but might be something we have not done so well. And then it's the labor market, which is very divided yet. Men are still very typical men jobs, and women in women jobs. We have probably not been very successful there either. So there are a lot of things that we could do better. Maybe that's it for now.
Thank you. Thank you. Sigríður.
Yes. I might use this one. I would like to start by thanking for being invited to be in this panel. It's a great honor, and it's very interesting to listen to my fellow politicians here. When it comes to the question, what have we done right, I would like to start with two things that I think are very important for women and families in the Nordic countries. That is the parental leave for both parents and kindergartens, very good kindergartens for all children. So I think these are, I would name these two first as my favorite. But then, generally speaking, then the countries are very prosperous countries and relatively equal due to the strong welfare system and democracy. And this, we also are societies that are inclusive for women, immigrants, and children. And we have affordable education and health system for everyone. And this has led to a big middle class, a culture of participation, democracy, and equality. Those are the broad lines, which I think are, this is what makes me happy to be a Nordic citizen and a woman in the Nordic countries. When we when we come to the question about what have we done wrong, I think the most threat to the Nordic system is that we are losing faith in it.
We are losing
faith in it. And I would say it's the political system, first and foremost the right wing, but also the left wing, have turned to more rational ideas. Tax reduction is one of them, which has led, and privatization of healthcare and schools. And this has led to more inequality and insecurity, which is a very good material to fuel nationalism. So when I'm, of course, being a left-wing politician, I like to blame the right wing, but I think the left wing also has to revise its ideas about, for example, when it comes to, we are all, whether right or wing, we are very busy with the issue of rationalization of the fiscal policy and so on and so on. And we have been quite ready to throw away or look away from fundamental parts of the Nordic model. And that, I think, is a threat to it. And as I said, doing that, we are also fueling nationalism and extremism. When it comes to what we can be a role model for others about, I think it would be my two favorite issues. The parental leave for both parents and good kindergartens for every child. It's very important for the participation of women, which is liberating for women and also very good for the economy. And it's very good for children who have equal access to, because children have, of course, some children really gain from going to kindergarten when they have difficult social circumstances and so on. And it's a very good atmosphere for children to grow up in. And there was something else I wanted to say, I think. Yes, when it comes to what we should learn from others, we being so arrogant as Nordic countries, it's a little bit difficult for us to think, what could we actually learn from others? We, those perfect countries. But I think we should mainly focus on countries that have more experience of migration and learn from them acceptance and tolerance for diversity.
Thank you. We have limited time, so I'm not going to raise the question to all. Are we losing faith in the Nordic system? It's a very big question, but something to think about. I want to go a little bit back to the presentations earlier, which raised the big issues that we are facing today, the great challenges of hate speech, refugee problem, fundamentalism, racism, and so on. And I would like to begin by asking Gudrun, because she has presented feminism as a solution to very many problems that we are facing, amongst them racism. And therefore, I would like to ask you, how can we use feminism? How can feminism be a tool in the fight against racism and fundamentalism?
Yes, I quite often say that feminism is the solution, but it's not that simple, of course. But is it possible to just say something about what the others said because I think if I go back and see what we did right, I was getting this in my head when you talked about the parental leave. I think that was a success. And it's interesting because what happened was that we had parental leave, we have daycare out in the society, which made it possible for women to go out and work in other areas, but also there, which made women economically independent, which make it possible for you to raise your voice. And that is all connected. And what you do is that you take unpaid, unseen work at home and say you are going to move outside in the society. And you fill it with more knowledge, and you pay for it. And you should really ask, what more could you have? What could you do with this, more of this unseen work? So I think this combination of society taking care of children and parental leave, and that we have a taxation that is individual, that we have at least in Sweden, and I think we have it all over now, which is also a main thing in this combination. That was very good. I just have to say to you, if I may, that when you say that we are prisoner in public sector because it means reduction in welfare sector when the economic is going down, that's a choice. And that's a very political choice. You can't say that this is a kind of fact. Maybe you didn't either. I'm a bit allergic. I'm sorry. When it comes to this other question about, I think you should put the question like this: what could feminism bring into the society, the development of society and the development of politics? What could be useful? And then you have to see that it has been rejected all the time. Has women's question been dealt with as a kind of special question? It's beside the real politics. It's a kind of women's question that should be dealt with by women. And they could be non-paid, and they could be working out in the society in shelters and things like that. I mean, it's a kind of, you know, it's women and other minority groups. We have some special rooms for them. We have some special groups for them. And this is a situation that we have to get rid of, which means that we say that the feminism should be a ground for it's an independent ideologic platform for political organization. That is what we have done in Sweden with the Feminist Initiative. And that means that we have to put the feminist analysis into every area. And I think there is one question, one crucial question that combines all what we have seen here, and that is the question of violence. And that is the biggest problem that we have in all our societies. It's the violence in the intimate relations, which we know is huge, and it's global. And it's not dealt with as a security problem, it's dealt with as a women's question. This is a catastrophe. And it really shows that people are not the same out from different sexes. It's a big security policy. It's the violence out in the society. I mean, this is patriarchal violence. It's a violence built upon the idea of domination and conquering. You have the violence out in the society. In our big cities, you have gangs that are protecting their territory. And they are fighting, and it's more and more armed. And you have violence in the supporter gang in the idrott, sports. You know, what group is the biggest and the best? We can fight about that, and people die. And we have the violence in the international relations, where we have more and more militarization of the idea of what security policy is. And it's concentrated to territory, not to human rights. And this is a catastrophe. And you see that all this violence, from the intimate violence to the international violence, are going and sticks together. And we see it in the military violence when women's bodies are treated as a part in the war. by raping women you can affect your enemy, and by raping women you can destabilize the whole society because women are rejected, and so it goes together. And it's the idea of the role of violence that are put into the group of men telling about this, what Helene Lööw told about, we are protecting. Men, the idea of what is to be a man is to be a protector. You should protect women and children and territories with weapons. And this goes all over. So I mean, one of the absolutely biggest input from feminism is to talk about the violence in this combination, because we can't address one part if we don't address the other one. And I know this is very provoking to say nowadays, maybe not in this country, but in Sweden, when everyone wants us to be a part of NATO, also in your country, maybe you too, I don't know. But I mean, this idea of violating and arm conflicts, this is the reason why we, in the end, which is now, have all these people that are on their way, because they flee for their lives, because of the violation of the conflicts that has been in their own country. It could be conflicts because of climate, it could be conflicts because of Taliban or the ES, but it's always this armed conflict. So what we could do, if we want to make any difference here, is to say we have to put down the idea of violence. We have to broaden the political and the debate of what is protection and who is going to be protected. And we have to leave the idea of territory and nations, and we have to stick to human beings.
Thank you. Do you want to contribute, Stefan?
Thank you. First, maybe to Gudrun about the public sector. Maybe prisoner is a strong word, maybe hostage could be better. But the point is, of course, that nobody wants to make budget cuts, because you jeopardize, the risk is huge that you jeopardize such achievements that have been the result of many, many years of political maybe struggle, but also, of course, results. And when the economy goes down very quickly, you might be able to give up some of these achievements, and that, of course, hurts. But I agree with Gudrun, of course, if you do budget cuts, you can make choices. You can make choices based on your values, and of course, values, many parties and politicians share the same values, but of course you also have different values, and that's what makes politics a little bit complicated sometimes. In Finland right now we have a coalition government where the Finns party is participating for the first time. It's a populist party. You could say it's a bunch of heteronormative meat-eating men. And that, of course, also means that they have their values. They have the absolute right to have their own values. But, well, I think a good illustration of what I'm talking about is that the government program has one single thing to say about gender equality. There is a phrase in the program that says, men and women are equal. That's it. I don't think that means that the job has been done, the job is completed. I would have expected a lot of more values in this respect from this government. And when a government like this makes budget cuts, you can realize what that might happen, what that might mean. So it's not always Christmas Eve to be in opposition, but I think right now it's quite easy to be it, because the government and the Finns party are offering us a lot of opportunities to have a high profile in these matters and issues.
Thank you. Gunvør.
Just a comment on the issue of how we get men more involved in this discussion. You know, we keep on praying the gospel to the choir, and I think talking about role models, I think Iceland is really a role model to us in the Faroes. We have looked a lot to Iceland, and especially as you mentioned, the parental rights. And I would like men to come more on the arena and to sort of tell their experience of, for instance, the parental rights. What have that done for them? Getting closer to the child, getting the right to their child in a higher degree. And it's been discussed a lot in the other Nordic countries. Do we want to have these quotas? It must be the free choice of the parents to decide whether the mother only should stay at home or both of them or whatever. But in Iceland, you've said 3 months is for the father. If he doesn't take it, you lose it. And that has, I have seen some research, and that has made the divorces go down in those families because fathers do take more responsibility in general at home, which is what every mother and woman wants. And it closes the ties between the father and child, of course, a right which the mother has had for centuries alone. So this is something that I think is the road to equality that somehow comes from the bottom up instead of governments putting legislation from top down and saying such and such. This is a way to start, because you start with the very beginning where the father and child can be as much together, and hence it comes naturally. So I think this is really a way to go, but I would like men to come more on the arena and sort of tell their experience and how this has been good for them, and hence more people will listen to gender equality makes sense and it's a good idea.
Well, on that I would like to say that I don't know, I think actually men in Iceland that have taken the parental leave, they have much closer relation to their children. They have had the opportunity to form the role of the father on their own, by their own will, not by the will of the mother. And they are much more participating in the life of their children. But I would like to link to what Gudrun said about violence, and I really think this is true. I would like first to say I love quotas and I love head counting. But that is not enough when you're fighting patriarchy. You of course have to change attitudes, and you have to unite those who want to change this, have to unite. And I wanted to link to the feminist movement, to the queer movement, the movement of for the rights of the handicap movement for rights. All those movements are speaking for diversity and how we should be allowed to be as we are, with equal rights, whether we are women, handicapped, homosexuals, or whatever. And those movements are a real threat to patriarchy. But I also think what makes me happy is that they are really affecting society. We have had in Iceland, just during this year's revolutions, with women freeing their breasts and saying we are not an object of pornography. We are defining our body. And you have had revolution of women coming forward that are telling about their experience from abuse, sexual abuse, and this is so. It shows us that things are really changing. But I mean, the tough patriarchal structure that has caused, and I mean, I think the situation in the world today, when it comes to global warming, when it comes to those terrible humanitarian crises and wars, they are the causes of patriarchy and capitalism. That is my opinion. And I think this is what we are fighting. But there are more and more people in the world that don't want the world to look like this. So we will just have to continue fighting together against it.
Thank you. I have so many questions for you. I think I have a list of 10 questions or so. But we only have 10 minutes left. So I am going to invite you to either say some closing remarks, something that you would particularly like to say in this session, or which I would be very interested in, the question that popped into my mind listening to Jón Ólafsson, the strategies, the political strategies that you have used through time to fight, to get your opinion heard, to get your agenda through, to you. The story he said, letting men present your ideas or letting men think they have the ideas or something like that. So I would like to ask you to choose one of these questions or closing remarks, because you each have 1 to 2 minutes left, I'm very sorry to say. Stefan.
Thank you. There's a lot of work to be done still, and I noticed when I was minister responsible for gender issues in Finland, gender equality, that, for instance, the private sector listened to what the minister for gender issues had to say with another kind of ear if he was a male. Sorry to say that, but I tried to look at this fact from the other side. Okay, if that's the case, then let me speak, if you listen when I speak. We still have a lot of inequality in the private business sector, starting from how the boardrooms look like. We still have not enough women in the boards as CEOs in the private sector overall. In the public sector, we have the quota system, and that has been a quite successful way of working. We still have the pay gap. In Finland, the woman's euro is 83 cents, and that's a huge scandal that we have to deal with. Just to mention these few examples, but they are huge examples, and we cannot look at our own picture in the mirror saying that equality is achieved, that men and women are equal, when such kind of issues are still unsolved.
Thank you. Sigríður, I would like to ask you now.
I would like Gudrun to answer the question about what a political strategy you use to fight this stigma as a woman. But I think I would like to answer both questions, and I will be very short. As a female politician, I just try to be myself and not let the guys tell me how to behave. But when you start to behave according to the model of politics, it can be okay and quite satisfying, but you always end up feeling like you are taking a part in something that is not natural to you. So sticking to your ideas, and that usually pays back. Gudrun was a role model for me when I lived in Sweden. I even voted for her party when I lived there, because she was a great politician, a woman who dared, and there were a lot of things happening around her, we can say. So, but when it comes to, I had the question of threats to the Nordic model, and I think what we have to think about in the Nordic countries, and what we are losing a little bit, although we have the social media and the internet, but when it comes to the democratic institution of society, we have to think about participation. That has been the strong side of the Nordic countries. And there the key factors are gender equality, it's affordable education, and affordable healthcare for everyone. I mean, those things that make us thriving, helps us to develop as human beings, and exercises us gives us skills to participate, is a very important thing for the future of the Nordic model. So I would say we have to take every measure to secure participation of everyone, not only the rich middle-class people that are white, but also low-wage earners, immigrants, children, disabled people, and so on. So that is the most important thing.
Thank you. Gunvør.
Yeah, Maybe I could just tell a little bit, give a little brief explanation on how the situation in the Faroes is now 100 years after we also got the vote, the female. Almost 1/3 of the parliament is women today, and for the first time in history, equal numbers of ministers are men and women. The government which just came into office a month ago, but we still have huge challenges in becoming a more equal society, also because we are a very traditionally fisheries-based society, which means that men work abroad or work away from the home, and that naturally means that the women stay at home in a much more higher degree than other Nordic countries. Out of a total number of 4,000 men in the Faroes who are in the age between 25 and 40, 75% of these men work abroad. They're home 50% of the time. And 2/3 of the women at the same age work in nurses and in old people's home, which means that they work nights and evenings. And at the same time, the Faroese women get much more children than other Nordic women. So that means that the average Faroese woman has more children than her sister in other Nordic countries, and she's alone to bring them up. And that naturally means that she cannot pursue these ambitious high jobs, being a politician or being a manager, because she's alone with the kids a lot of the time. And therefore, a lot of I think it's 70% of Faroese women work part-time, because otherwise the day-to-day just doesn't work. So these are structural problems that we deal with, which makes us completely in another area. We cannot talk about female equal rights since we have these structural problems, because the men are just away. And that's a huge challenge, which also means that women are more dependent on their men, because they often pay well. They stay working poor until they get their pension. So we have really fundamental problems with the labor market. And I think we are also the only country in the Nordic who still has 40 hours working week. So it's very hard to work for a full week with all these factors playing a role. So we have challenges which maybe other countries have come past, which makes it a little bit difficult to talk about gender in the same line as in the other countries.
Thank you. Gudrun.
Okay, I should end with saying a bit provoking. I don't think it's our problem to question why men are not here. I think it's their problem. We should question why aren't we more? Men, women, whatever sex, whatever gender identity, whatever. But I mean, it's not our job to go out and tell men, you should really be here because you would be a much better person if you were here. You should understand that you love your children. If you haven't understood it, you should do it now. I mean, it's not the way. I think we should tell the truth. There is a big conflict in our society, and it's permanent. And it shows in every field, in every arena, in every relation. There is a conflict, and it's the old patriarch thinking, and there is another idea of being able to be a human being whatsoever, that you should address yourself as an individual, and you should be able to come and to take part of everything. And it's this conflict you have. We have to raise it, and we have to make it into politics. Because it's not an individual problem. Discrimination is never an individual problem. It's a structural problem, and you meet structural problems with structural methods, which is politics. It's social reforms, it's law, and all these things that we are using the democratic tools to try to solve. And that's why all these questions that are said to be something aside, some minority question, all these things has to be a part of real politics. We have to widen the idea of what politics should be about, and it should be about human rights. which includes gender equality and non-freedom from all forms of discrimination. And that is what we have to do, and that's why we have to do what they did 100 years ago, organize. They went into the traditional political parties. Someone of the historical persons here told about that. And then the political parties smashed them because they don't want to leave their political positions. It's power. It's about power. That's why we in Sweden have formed a new political party. Because I really tried in the one where I were. There is a glass ceiling all over. Although there is nice writings about rights and so forth. So you have to understand that. It could be hard, and there is a resistance. And, well, I think we can live with that. We have to build up the power that is needed to enter the seats where the decisions are made. We have to be fully out part of the society, and then we should have fully out the power to be a part of forming and shaping the society, including ourselves, our own lives. And that's what it's all about. So organize. Again, and again, and again, and start working.
Beautiful closing remarks. I would like to thank all of you for participating.